As we turn our attention over to the grain markets now, this week we are joined by Todd Hultman of DTN. Todd, you and I are having this conversation on Wednesday afternoon, which is prior to the much anticipated USDA acreage report that is coming out on Thursday. Let's get some of your expectations. What are you thinking we might see in those numbers?
Well, thank you for having me, Bryce. I think obviously we're going to have a lot of excitement over just what the planting estimates are for corn and beans. Both of those numbers expected near 90 million acres, but I think possibly this year, for the first time since the pick year of 1983, we might see those soybean acres creep above the corn. Of course, we had high fertilizer expenses this year being part of it. There's also excitement about the prospects of an expanding growth industry in renewable diesel, fueling some excitement for soybeans. So we'll see on Thursday here, but I think we might come in a little above corn for the soybean acres.
Okay, definitely something we'll keep an eye on and see what happens with that report. Let's just get your general take on these markets right now. It's been an interesting trade as of late, hasn't it been?
Yeah, it's been very tough. We had a pretty harsh sell-off in the past week and a half for corn, soybeans, and wheat, all three. A lot of it was speculative selling. It was related to fears about recession and outside markets and talk of higher interest rates. It didn't really have a lot to do with the specifics of corn, soybeans, or wheat themselves. Those fundamentals are still kind of up in the air, and we still see a lot of bullish risk to the upside. So we had a good solid week and a half of getting hit pretty hard by outside influences, but we still have a couple corn and soybean crops to raise this summer, and we're a little concerned about the hot and dry forecasts ahead of us.
Let's hit on that hot and dry forecast here in a second, but as we look at that sell-off from last week, speaking with producers, I mean, it's frustrating for them because they say nothing has changed here. We are facing kind of a hot, dry forecast here, as I talked to a lot of them in eastern Nebraska. So what do you say to the producer out there with their frustration of the outside factors impacting this trade right now?
You know, it's an ongoing topic, Bryce, but there's always a speculative element in our markets. Sometimes that works in our favor. In the last week and a half, it obviously has not. Some of the market concerns maybe are slightly legitimate as far as the possibility of a slowing economy, but the grain prices themselves didn't deserve to get hit as hard as they did. It's part of the ups and downs of the big game, and I hate to say, you know, it's not going away anytime soon. But we have been trying to warn about the volatility inherent in the markets this year, especially with the war in Ukraine creating so much uncertainty and disrupting a lot of outside markets as well as our grain markets.
You mentioned the words hot and dry, and that's exactly what DTN is forecasting for the rest of the growing season, it sounds like. How far out, I mean, when we say growing season, how far out is DTN predicting we might see that weather pattern holding, and what could that mean for the markets?
Yeah, well, I have to say our meteorologists have been very consistent on this theme even over the winter. They were telling us that they had a hot and dry outlook for the months of July, August, and September. That still has stood consistently and still stands as our forecast for these critical months for corn and soybeans especially, and a bit for spring wheat as well. Now, currently we're going through a short-term phase where we're getting some milder temperatures. There's a chance of rain in the northern plains in the next 6 to 10 days. But overall, the larger forecast for the month of July, as I mentioned, is largely hot and dry. So we're already starting to see some of the soil moisture levels start to decline.
Todd, I know you're keeping an eye on things all across the world, and that includes Brazil. Tell me what you're tracking down there.
Yeah, well, in Brazil, it's very interesting. They actually had a very dry season for their second corn crop in central Brazil, but it looks like they've done just enough to get a decent enough yield that they're going to still come out with a record corn crop. They had about a 10% increase in planted acres this year. So that's really helped maintain the level of production that it looks like they're going to come up with about 4.5 billion bushels of corn. They're roughly 1/4 of the way through their harvest so far this season for that second corn crop. And so we're going to have the next few months, there will be some competition from increased supplies from Brazil, but keep in mind we don't have the normal competition we normally would from Ukraine this coming summer. So we still have a fairly good outlook for corn exports here in the U.S., but we do have to note there will be some competition from Brazil.
Todd, as we wrap up here, of course, we'll have that report come out on Thursday. The trade will discuss that far and wide. But as we get out a week past that, where's this market going? All about the weather, I have to guess?
Yeah, of course. This time of year, weather is going to be the predominant factor. I think if the outside market concerns and the speculative selling that we saw the past week and a half did the market a bit of a favor, I think it probably scared a lot of the weak hands out, and our prices for corn, soybeans, and wheat are all now near what should be some pretty solid support levels. So I don't think we're going to have a lot of more potential for downside here, at least in the next month ahead. And of course, we're going to be watching that weather forecast very close.
Todd, it's always interesting to get your take on these markets. Thanks for coming back to Market Journal.
My pleasure, Bryce.